Welcome back to another episode of Banterly, the podcast by Immigrantly Media about Gen Z for Gen Z.
That it is. I'm Aditi.
And I'm Aidan. Almost forgot that. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Hey, names are
Names
important.
are important.
Nice to meet you if this is your first time on.
Welcome to the family. How are you doing?
Oh, how am I doing today? Good, I think. I had to think about it for a while. Good. Life is busy.
Yeah, I'm good too. It's very busy. I'm have some exciting trips planned. I'm going to Canada this
Canada.
weekend. Got an Airbnb with my friends from high school. We're gonna stay there for a whole week on a cute little river in Quebec. So
Wait, that's so fun. I've never been to Quebec. What do you do there?
I've only been to Montreal, which is in Quebec, the province, and I was there for like a day, like did a day trip. I haven't really spent more than a day there. So it seems like a very quiet rural area where we'll be. So just a lot of like games and bonding and like cute
Is it
little
like a cabin
moments.
vibe? Are you doing like a cabin vibe there?
Cabin vibe, yeah, sort of. It's like house, but it's like the vibe that we're gonna be doing is cabin within house. But it's on the water, like it has a pool. Not that
It's
we'll be
like house.
swimming, but it's like house.
Right.
Cabin vibe like house.
I love that. That reminds me, do you know that TikTok, the TikTok that's like, luckily I have purse? That's what
Luckily,
you just did
yes.
with house.
I
So,
have purse. Oh,
what other pop culture things have you been into lately?
let's talk about Bridget Mendler because I loved Good Luck Charlie was one of my favorite TV shows on Disney. Amy Duncan, Babam. But Homegirl is doing the most. Like she went to USC, MIT, Harvard Law School, and then she's just announced recently that she's a CEO of some space software company and also adopted a child.
She adopted a child? When?
Yes, she had 2 years ago. Her and her husband adopted
She's
a
married?
boy.
I,
She's married.
that I
And
didn't
one of her
know.
bridesmaids was Naomi Scott from Lemonade Mouth.
No
Is that her
way.
who played? Yeah. Yeah. She really
Wow.
is like
She has a crazy resume.
crazy. Her LinkedIn is insane. Good for her. Like it's insane. So I'm happy that she's slaying.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before. I am a proud AMC A-list member. My favorite movie, this is kind of a hard question because I kind of categorize movies in different ways, but I would say if you were to go on my letterbox, my first film on my like top four favorites is Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang.
Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
I am paying attention.
Now, you may only see a pile of receipts, but I see a story.
I think that movie for me was like unlike anything I had ever seen before. Number one, fantastic like Asian cast. I think it was so phenomenal. Ki Hui Kwan became one of my obsessions in 2023. Every time he won an award, all of his speeches were so phenomenal. He started off in Indiana Jones. He was a child actor and he wasn't getting hired in Hollywood. And this movie was his first gig after so long. He was struggling to even find health insurance. Like he had a phenomenal kind of start with Indiana Jones, but because he was Asian, he wasn't being hired anymore. He wasn't being booked. And then Everything Everywhere All at Once comes along and he wins so many awards. He gets the recognition he deserves. I don't know. It was a phenomenal story to watch with him. And then just the movie itself, I think I sobbed. I watched the movie a couple of times. I sobbed so much at the end just because I think I am someone who also deals with like not just indecision, but just feeling like, oh, there's a version of me who's doing XYZ somewhere else. And so to be able to see a visual depiction of multiple realities and notably how it impacts their family dynamics. I mean, just the mother-daughter relationship was just so like heartbreaking at times and heartwarming simultaneously. I don't know. I've never seen a movie like that before, so I think that's my favorite.
I was late to the game, but I watched it and it was it was good. But it's actually funny that that's your favorite movie, and the reason why is my favorite movie is The Goonies, one of Ke Huy Quan's first roles.
Besides, we gotta get to the police.
Maybe Chunk already got to the police.
Maybe Chunk is dead.
Don't say that. Never say that. Goonies never say die.
I love The Goonies. Came out in 1985, I think, and it was one of the movies that we had on DVD when I was little. So when we would drive to school, sometimes we were allowed to watch like a movie, and that just stayed in on repeat to the point where I could probably still quote most of it. Me and my brother also watched it with like special features. We watched it with commentary multiple times. So like when you're not even like listening to the movie, you're just listening to the actors talk. Like that's how repetitive it was. Like I feel like I know that movie inside and out. I know like where actors made mistakes because they would be like, oh, in that scene I didn't call him Bran, I called him Josh. I called him by his real name. And so now I pick up, like, I have all the moments, and it's such a good movie. The Cyndi Lauper Goonies are good enough. Music video is really good. The cast was really good. It's just a cute little heartwarming, silly movie. It's not, winning Academy Awards, but it's still good and it's still nostalgic for me. And I could watch that movie over and over again and never get tired of it because I did.
Well, that perfectly connects to exactly what we're going to talk about today, which is the Oscars. Now, you mentioned that you don't really watch movies that often. Do you at least do you usually watch the Oscars every year? Do you follow the news around it?
I follow the news around it. So I think I know about the movies, but I think I've only watched the Oscars a couple times. I normally watch it for the performances. I'll watch the performances later, or I'll watch the red carpet before. Yeah, I think there was a period where I was like, oh, I want to watch these Oscar movies. And maybe I did that for a couple, 1 or 2 years, but it's really not if I watch it, I'll watch it, the movie, but I'm not like, oh, I need to watch it to see, to know and understand the Oscars.
No, I feel similarly. I never make it a goal to watch all of the Oscar nominated movies, but I feel like this year has been a unique year for the Oscars. I feel like there's been so much hype around most of the movies that have been nominated for Best Picture, and I think, at least I've been feeling it personally, there's been kind of a cinema renaissance, and not just the Beyonce movie that was in theaters, but I think there have been phenomenal films, and I don't know if it's coming out of the pandemic, we're starting to see where a lot of people put their creative energies, we're trying to get people back to the movie theaters after not going for so long. But I think we're in a very fascinating and honestly innovative era of cinema, and I think that the movies we're talking about today are great examples of that.
That's so true. I feel like movies for this season were really big. They transcended just the movie theater. They were Barbenheimer was just everywhere. You could not miss Barbenheimer. And I feel like I haven't, at least what I've noticed, I haven't seen that about a movie, hype around a movie since when Harry Potter was coming out, or the first Avengers or Twilight, when those those had such hype and people waiting in lines. And I feel like you're right. It's the renaissance of cinema, and we're here.
We're here. And it's so exciting. And so today we're going to talk about 3 of the Best Picture nominees. We're going to talk about The Holdovers, going to talk about Poor Things, and Oppenheimer.
Every year at Barton Academy, students, faculty, and staff depart the campus for a 2-week winter break. But there are always an unfortunate few who have nowhere to go for the holidays. They're known as the Holdovers.
I just watched this one recently, and I had heard about it because I did watch the Golden Globes this year with my friends, and we saw Davine Joy Randolph win a Golden Globe for her role. And I had never heard about this movie until the Golden Globes. It's a prep school set in the early 70s in Massachusetts, I think, or somewhere in New England. And it's during their winter term, so everybody's going home. But it's like a prep boarding school. So I guess some students stay behind during the winter term if they can't or don't have any place to go, or their parents are busy, which it turns out a lot of their families just don't really like them very much. So they're not going home, which is sad. But a few students stay home, and one teacher who's kind of like the mean, cranky teacher, and then the cook. And the cook is the character that was played by Davine Joy Randolph. And she just lost her son in the Vietnam War.
They invited me to go visit them in Roxbury, but I feel like it's too soon. Like Curtis will think that I'm abandoning him, you know? This is the last place that my baby and I were together, not including the bus station.
Well, I look forward to your fine cooking.
Oh, no, don't do that. All we've got is whatever's in that walk-in. No delivery.
It's sad, but it's beautiful. But I liked it. Great soundtrack, nostalgic vibes. Made me want to go to a prep school in the 70s. Or go to like a small liberal arts college, honestly. Like, I like the vibes of that. Like, I missed out on that. Like, in New England. So, what did you think?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I feel like I tried to avoid watching the Holdovers. There was just something. I watched the trailer so many times, and I think this might just be a personal preference. I didn't like how they laid out the trailer for it. I don't think I liked the nostalgic take that they had, which I don't know what that says about me particularly, but it was just a style that they used that turned me off to it. Like, it just wasn't something that I vibed with. So I had fairly low expectations going in, but I mean, I completely agree with what you said. I think it was a very beautiful, heartwarming story. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that I adored it. I think just as a movie, it's not something that I would seek out if it wasn't nominated. Like, I had no interest kind of going into it conceptually. I'm glad that I watched it, and I think that the soundtrack was amazing. The performances were really great. With Hunnam, the teacher, I think seeing his development, and, you know, I really liked the scene between him and Hunnam and Angus, like when Angus is like running through the school and he's chasing after him. Like, I think there were a lot of really fun moments of like really feeling like you're in the boarding school with them and feeling the tension between them, which made the ending even better. Ultimately, it was a very beautiful movie.
I get that it was definitely a style of nostalgia, but it made me nostalgic for an era that I wasn't even alive in. And I've talked about this before, but I'm very nostalgic. So it made me like miss the old days. So I was like, oh, wow, I miss the 70s.
I will say that Davine was the highlight of the movie for me entirely.
Oh, for sure.
I
was on the edge, like crying, like, oh my, it was all really well done and really, really heartbreaking.
Absolutely.
Watching her journey with her grief. It was.
I know. I mean, just a phenomenal actress. And I think, yeah, I mean, I don't entirely know if she was nominated for other Oscars for that role specifically, but God, I hope so.
Yeah, I haven't seen her in anything else. So I hope, I'm not that doesn't mean anything, because obviously I don't watch a whole lot, but I hope that this is a good moment for her in her career. And she looked great at the Golden Globes, so can't wait to see what she's wearing to the Oscars.
Absolutely. I know that she was in Only Murders in the Building, the TV show with Selena Gomez. I'm sure she's phenomenal in everything that she's in. But yeah, I don't know. The Holdovers. It was, maybe I gave a hot take.
No, that's not a hot take. I was talking to a friend of mine and she also didn't like it. So you are not the only one out there. I didn't ask, not because I didn't care, because I do care about what she thinks, but I enjoyed it. And so I was like, oh, okay. I can see why it's not like a movie that I'm like, oh, how could you not like that? Like, I get why maybe it's not your thing.
Yeah.
Like The
I
Goonies. How could you not like The Goonies? Kidding.
Right.
But
No, I mean, that to me is like clearly a classic. And maybe I just need to rewatch this movie. Just kidding. I never want to watch it again.
well, I probably won't watch it again either. It's not something that I can definitely, but it's like it was enjoyable. But yeah, that's all I got.
Speaking of rewatching films, let's roll into Oppenheimer.
We're in a race against the Nazis. And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
It follows Robert Oppenheimer, played by the wonderful Cillian Murphy. I love him. And it essentially walks us through a few different key moments. There's like 3 storylines that are happening simultaneously, and I love the structure of this movie. I think it's so brilliant. We see him developing the bomb. You know, we go to Los Alamos, we see the entire progression of that, and ultimately we also see the aftermath of Hiroshima. He grapples with the fact that that is essentially the role that he has taken on.
And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
And I just want to clarify, I am not a history person. All the hype was going on about this movie. I love Christopher Nolan. Interstellar is one of the 4 films on my Letterboxd favorites. Inception, also one of my favorite movies. I think Christopher Nolan is a genius. So I was going into this being like, okay, I'm not into history, don't really care about, watching movies about war. Like, war is bad. I don't want to see, like, maybe a romanticization of it, things like that. Again, I've seen this movie 3 times. I think it's done so well. The performances are fantastic. The visuals, okay, the first time I watched it in theaters, but I couldn't get tickets to how you were supposed to watch it, which is in the traditional IMAX theater that does, I think it's a something millimeter screen. There were like very specific ways that Christopher Nolan wanted you to watch this movie because he filmed it all on IMAX film cameras. The second time I watched it, I finally got tickets to the Lincoln Center IMAX in the theater where it's like the perfect way to watch it. When I tell you, I have never felt so immersed in a film. Just the sound was vibrating through me.
This is a national emergency.
Detonator charged.
The visuals are the most phenomenal things I've ever seen. And I'm really into space movies just because I love space. I think space is really cool. Would love to go one day. But the visuals in it, like seeing it on an IMAX screen, it like, I don't know if you've ever been to the Lincoln Center IMAX. The screen is like curved. And like, when I tell you, I think I wrote in one of my Letterboxd reviews, my second review of it, I said, saw this in IMAX finally. It swallowed me whole, and I now live happily inside. And that's truly how I feel. Like, to me, Oppenheimer is pure cinema. And hey, I just went on like a 20-minute rant about how much I love that movie. What did you think?
That is hard to follow. Yeah, so like I said, I've only seen it once, very, very recently. I wish that I would have, because I did end up having to watch it, I wish I would have seen it in the movie theater because I would have been more focused on it, especially because sometimes with movies that flash forward and have different timelines, it's harder for me to follow, and I really need to focus. And anything when I'm not focused normally, I'm just everywhere. So like being sat down in like a theater would have been really nice to watch it, but it was still like I can still appreciate how well it was done. And
like you said, there's so many things that are happening all at once in this movie. I was very confused the first time I watched it. I don't think I had like fully mentally parsed through all of the storylines. But I also just think it did a really good job about making such dense topics about history. It made it very digestible, and like I could follow the story in history. And it made me like, right after I was like, I'm going to read the book. I never did. And I don't think I ever will. But it made me think about it, which is huge, I think, because I never would have otherwise.
My favorite part of the movie, well, my favorite scene was when he's like giving a speech to the audience after the Hiroshima bombings, when it's like, that was just like, oh my God, that was really crazy. But my favorite part of just watching the movie in general was like, what random actor am I going to see pop into a role? I feel like the cast was stacked in the most interesting way. All these random people like Rami Malek, Josh Peck was a jump scare. Devin Bostick from Diary of a Wimpy Kid was crazy. That's what I liked. I liked like, who am I going to see next? That was enjoyable for me.
And on the note of guest stars, in my Letterboxd review when I first watched the movie on July 24th, I literally wrote Naked Brothers Band and Josh Peck jump scares.
Yes.
Just because I think like it's just absolutely absurd. And also the fact that Josh Peck presses the fucking button for the test is so funny. Like it could have been anyone else. Like why him? Like I'm happy for him, but I just thought that was insane. An insane choice. There's just so many scenes. I could go on and on about this movie, evidently, but I think the use of sound was absolutely phenomenal. So there's two things that I wanted to mention. The first one you already mentioned, which is when he's giving the speech after Hiroshima, and everyone is applauding. And then another use of sound that just blows me away every time is when they do the test. And then you expect, as an audience member, to hear a huge boom, but you only hear their breathing. That, like, when I first experienced that, it was just like, yeah, I could go on and on. I just think this movie was so brilliantly done, and if it doesn't win Best Picture, I might be a little bit angry, but I feel like it will win. That's my prediction. And so I wanted to bring up Poor Things because similarly to the Holdovers, I'm more passionate about this than I am about the Holdovers. I thought that Poor Things, it was brilliantly done.
I am Bella Baxter. I'm a flawed, experimenting person. I seek outings and adventures. Bella's so much to discover.
So for those who don't know what Poor Things is about, let me just break it down, because I didn't know going in. A woman commits suicide, and she's pregnant. A doctor, similarly to Frankenstein, finds his body. It's Willem Dafoe, by the way, which is crazy. He takes the baby out of the dead woman's stomach, removes the brain from said baby, and then the baby's brain is now in the woman. So she's now her baby. And you basically watch her go through the stages of development. And I think that this could be a more poignant film if we watch her grapple with her womanhood in all aspects that accompany with being a woman. But at every turn, it's only focused on her sexuality. And I think the fact that it was written by a man also kind of threw me off. But I mean, the fact that at many points it is technically like a 10-year-old child being sexualized because she acts like the age that she's supposed to be, but she looks like an adult. Like, it just seems so problematic. Like, why is a man who's Mark Ruffalo hitting on this woman who was technically 5 years old right now? Like, why are we just brushing past that that's actually what's happening right now? And like, they're fine with the fact that she calls sex like something jumping. Like, she is just so clearly childish in so many of her mannerisms, but she is still sexualized despite the fact that she acts like a child and she has the brain of a child. I don't know. I just think it's a deeply problematic movie, and I feel like nobody else is talking about those specific points, and I feel crazy for feeling like this movie shouldn't be like hailed for what it is. Really, I just wanted to take the space to rant about poor things.
No, this is a safe space and it's our space, so do whatever you want.
Exactly.
But I will have all that in mind when I one day eventually, maybe probably, watch it. Whenever I see that a movie's Academy Award nominated or they're an Academy Award winning actor or actress or director, I think for a while it was like, oh my God, you must be good. You must be amazing. Like, and I still think that. I still think like that's a really high achievement to obtain and to have. But I'm in terms of the debate between highbrow versus lowbrow art, I'm one that I see those things, but I hate when people will shame people for consuming one more than the other, specifically highbrow people, in quotes, being like, oh my God, like, how could you watch that? Like this, if you want to see a good movie, you have to watch this. Don't watch like, This Is 40. Like, yeah, that's good. It's funny, but like, you have to watch, like, this was at Sundance. This was at Tribeca. Like, that's like, okay, like, I took a class. I think I talked about this class, but it was like culture writing and journalism and elective in college. And there was such a debate around highbrow versus lowbrow art. And the media that I consume is mostly what people would deem as lowbrow because it's reality TV or stupid Netflix shows. But I love it. And that doesn't make me a dumb person. And I would write about that. And I got the vibe from the class and maybe the professor too, that it just wasn't good enough to be talking about because it didn't deserve that. It was it was uncultured. Like, I'm like, wow, it's reality. Like, and I just can't stand that when people are like, oh, I don't get this. How could, like, what do you mean you don't? It's reality TV. It's enjoyable. Like, that's my, I just can't stand the highbrow versus lowbrow shame. I don't care. I get that they're different genres and I get that they're different, but don't make someone feel bad for not wanting or not understanding why that movie would be really good. Because at the end of the day, the majority of people probably watch the quote unquote lowbrow things because they don't have like these Oscar films are for this, and the opera and all these fancy things are for a specific group of people. Nowadays, it's more across the board, but it started out very closed in. That's it. What do you got?
No, no, I completely agree with you. And I think, like, I feel like I wasn't really familiar with the conversation surrounding film until I got to New York. Like, I just feel like I wasn't around these conversations at all in high school. I mean, middle school. What the fuck were we watching then? But I think, especially at Columbia, I felt that there was such a crazy community of people who just had superiority complexes over what they watched and how they're able to criticize it. And I'm sure you felt the same way at NYU.
Oh my gosh. It was
It's actually
insane.
the most annoying thing in the world.
And trying to like mansplain or like movie-splain something to me, it's like, come on, you get off your high horse. It's a movie. And honestly, nobody can understand it but you're overanalyzing. Like, it's like, yeah, I see that. I see it.
I just think I think online there's also this joke going around about like the film bro who's really trying to overanalyze everything. I think I spent 4 years around that type of person a lot, and God, I hated it. And I mean, I like watching Oscar nominated movies because I'm like, oh, why did people think that this was phenomenal, you know? And like, I like to see what, you know, people deem to be great, whatever. But I feel like I don't hold any value to it. I feel especially passionately about like me believing that the Grammys mean absolutely nothing, and that's a whole other conversation. But I just think these award shows are like platforms for the wealthy to get all dressed up and for successful people to, you know, be recognized for whatever. I think a lot of time, like, we still are facing like the first Black actress to win blah 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 blah, you know, like we're still needing to cross a lot of boundaries for some reason. Like, I mean, I mentioned Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, that set so many records for Asian actors. And it was 2023. Like, I don't think that award shows offer anything novel. I just think it's a fun event for rich people to be rich and for us to watch and be like, oh, Zendaya looks fantastic. Because that's
Yeah.
typically what happens.
It's Hunger Games-esque, but I agree. I feel like award shows are it's a popularity contest, and it's a who's richer and can put more money into this movie to make it win. And I like when you brought up the Grammys, the fact that Miley Cyrus just won a Grammy, and the fact that Nicki Minaj, we've talked about her being problematic, but the music is good. Katy Perry, all these people who have had success in so many different ways just because they didn't have, but they don't have that award, and Amy Adams not having an Oscar. And I actually wrote down, I found this list of all these people that don't have Oscars. Alfred Hitchcock? What? Alfred Hitchcock? Glenn Close? Barbara Streisand? All these John Hughes? All these amazing, like, really culturally, like, even the highbrow people would be like, oh, that's an amazing, like, Glenn Close was so good. And it's like, yeah, but she doesn't have an Oscar. Like, what does that mean? Like, she's been nominated, I think, 8 times. It's like, who chooses? Oh, I know who chooses. A group of 80% white people and 67% men. So it's like, I think it's important to put weight to the Oscars because they do mean something. But it's also like, okay, just because you have an Oscar doesn't mean you're that great. Most of the time it does, because it's hard and a lot of the performances are good, but it's not like a if A then B type of deal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I feel like that kind of segues into something that really took over the internet after it happened, but this alleged Barbie snub, where I think Margot Robbie wasn't nominated for Best Actress, and the internet went up in flames. Did you have any thoughts about that when that happened?
When I think of the Oscars, I don't think of Barbie as an Oscar movie. Barbie was like an entertaining movie. It was pretty to look at. They had star power. It was a box office success. It had a good meaning. I never assumed that Barbie was going to be like this big Oscar winner. I'm glad that it did get nominated for some things. But when people were saying like Margot Robbie, like Ryan Gosling took Margot Robbie's spot, like all this stuff, like, well, I don't understand why Ryan Gosling got nominated to begin with. He was in a section with men, and Margot was up against other women. And I think the women that quote unquote beat her also did an amazing job. And America Ferrera also got nominated. And I feel like people just focused on Margot Robbie not getting nominated. But it didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Greta Gerwig didn't get nominated for Director, which is, that's interesting. But I also don't think people were like, it was like, it broke records. It was like, yeah, like so did the Avengers. Like, but they're not getting Oscar. I feel like I don't know. It was amazing when Melissa McCarthy got nominated for an Oscar for Bridesmaids. That shook my world because that's not the type of movie that normally gets nominated. So I see what people are saying with this whole Barbie was snubbed, but it wasn't snubbed because it did get nominations.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. With Margot Robbie, exactly like you said, like the other actresses who were nominated for Best Actress, I mean, they just objectively did a better job. Like Margot Robbie was fantastic, don't get me wrong, and I loved the film, but she didn't do anything phenomenal, you know what I mean? So I don't necessarily agree with that. I do think Greta Gerwig should have been nominated for Best Director. I watched a lot of videos of her talking about how she directed specific scenes, and I watched videos of how she interacted with people on set as director, and I think that she kind of redefined that role in a very phenomenal way. And again, it did break records for the box office, which I think was phenomenal, especially in a post-pandemic world. And I think for her to not get recognized for that, and also have like all these other men be nominated, but not her, like I do think in that way, it's a snub. I mean, not that the other directors weren't great. I mean, I already talked about my hate for Poor Things. The director of that is nominated, and I don't think he should be there. I think Greta Gerwig should be there instead. Well, on that note, this is a really fun conversation. Let us know your thoughts on all these movies that we've discussed and the Oscars as a whole. Do you believe in it? Do you watch every single movie? Do you think it's absolutely ridiculous and you don't understand why we even have it at all? Let us know.
Yeah, share your thoughts with us at Banterly at immigrantlypod.com and engage with us on our socials at Immigrantly Media on Instagram and at Immigrantly Podcast on TikTok.
Banterly is produced by Shay Yu, written by us, the co-hosts Aditi Misra and Aidan Taylor. The executive producer and editorial review is done by Sadia Khan.
Our sound designer and editor is Steve Martin. The Banterly theme music is by Simon Hutchinson. Additional music is by Epidemic Sound. See y'all next week.